Listen, when a man hurts you, most people react the same way. They cry, they chase, they question, they try to fix what they didn't break. And that's exactly what he expects. But what he doesn't expect is control. What he doesn't expect is calm. What he doesn't expect is a version of you that doesn't react the way he predicted. That's where your power is. You don't confuse him by playing games. You confuse him by changing your energy completely. Let's break it down. When someone hurts you, the immediate urge is to respond right away. You feel the emotion rising, confusion, anger, disappointment, and your instinct is to express it, to ask questions, to demand clarity. In that moment, it feels justified. You want them to understand what they did, to feel what you feel, to fix what they broke. But reacting instantly places you in a position where your emotions are leading, not your awareness. And when emotions take over, you often say more than necessary, reveal more than you should, and give away control without realizing it. Pausing changes everything. Instead of feeding the situation with immediate emotion, you create space between what happened and how you respond. That space is where your power sits. It allows you to observe rather than react, to understand rather than chase answers. When you don't respond right away, you break the pattern they might be expecting. Most people anticipate an emotional reaction, messages, calls, or visible frustration. When that doesn't happen, it creates uncertainty. They begin to wonder what you're thinking, how you're feeling, and why you're not reacting the way they assumed you would. Resetting your energy means pulling your focus back to yourself instead of staying locked onto what they did. It's about refusing to let someone else's behavior dictate your emotional state. You acknowledge what happened, but you don't let it control your actions. This doesn't mean suppressing your feelings. It means processing them privately instead of projecting them outward. You give yourself time to think clearly, to regain composure, and to decide your next move from a place of strength rather than impulse. There's also a level of discipline involved in not reacting immediately. It requires you to resist the urge to prove a point or seek validation in the moment. You begin to realize that not every situation deserves your instant attention or explanation. By stepping back, you protect your dignity and your emotional stability. You show that you're not easily shaken, not easily pulled into drama, and not dependent on someone else's behavior to define your state of mind. Over time, this approach reshapes how you handle conflict and disappointment. You become more intentional, more controlled, and less reactive. People start to recognize that they can predict or manipulate your responses, and that unpredictability shifts the dynamic. Instead of reacting from emotion, you move with clarity, and that alone changes how others perceive and treat you. There is a powerful difference between being cold and being calm, and most people confuse the two when they are hurt. Coldness comes from emotional shutdown. It's when you block everything, suppress your feelings, and operate from bitterness or revenge. But calmness is something entirely different. Calmness is not emotional absence. It is emotional control. It means you feel everything, but you don't let it control how you move, how you speak, or how you respond. When a man hurts you, your emotions naturally rise. You feel disrespected, confused, and sometimes even replaced or ignored. In that moment, it is easy to go cold and shut down completely, to stop caring in a forced way. But forced detachment still carries emotional weight. It often shows in your reactions, your tone, and your decisions. Calmness, however, removes the noise. It allows you to acknowledge the situation without letting it define your next action. When you respond with calm energy, you change the entire dynamic. You are no longer reacting from pain or trying to prove something. Instead, you are observing and choosing your response carefully. Your tone becomes steady. Your words become minimal but meaningful. You stop over-explaining your feelings or justifying your worth. That quiet control creates a sense of uncertainty in the other person because they cannot read your emotional state easily anymore. Calmness also protects your dignity in a way emotional reactions cannot. When you react with anger or frustration, you often end up saying things you later regret or giving too much insight into how deeply you are affected. But when you stay calm, You maintain your power. You don't lose yourself in the moment. You stay centered even when the situation is uncomfortable. This kind of energy is not about pretending to be unaffected. It's about not allowing someone else's actions to pull you out of your balance. You still feel, you still process, but internally rather than externally. And that internal processing keeps your strength intact. Over time, calmness becomes your signature response. People begin to notice that they can no longer trigger emotional chaos in you the way they once could. That shift alone changes how they approach you, because calm energy is unpredictable in the most powerful way. It doesn't give away control. It holds it quietly and steadily. When you start explaining your value to someone who has already shown you disregard, you unknowingly step into a position where your worth feels like it needs approval. You begin to justify your presence, your loyalty, your effort, and your intentions as if they are not already enough on their own. But real value does not require explanation. It is either recognized through consistent actions or it is not understood at all, no matter how many words you use. The moment you feel the need to say, "I did this for you," or "I always cared," or "you don't appreciate me," you are entering a cycle where you are trying to convince someone who has already chosen their behavior. And convincing rarely changes someone's perception in the long term. It only drains your energy and weakens your position because it places your emotional state in their hands. When you stop explaining your worth, you shift the focus away from words and back to reality. Your actions, your consistency, and your boundaries begin to speak for you. Instead of trying to make someone understand how valuable you are, you start showing that your presence is not something that comes with endless access or repeated chances. You stop overgiving in hopes of being understood and start observing whether your energy is being matched. This shift is subtle but powerful. You begin to communicate less from emotion and more from awareness. You no longer chase validation through conversations that go in circles. You realize that explaining yourself repeatedly to someone who isn't paying attention is not communication. It is depletion. And once you recognize that, you naturally start pulling back from unnecessary discussions that only drain you further. Over time, this approach builds a stronger sense of self-respect. You stop performing your worth for people who don't acknowledge it. You stop trying to prove your intentions to those who have already decided how they see you. Instead, you focus on maintaining your standards quietly and consistently. That silence carries more weight than any explanation ever could, because it shows you no longer need approval to stand firm in who you are. When your focus stays locked on the person who hurt you, you unintentionally give them space to dominate your thoughts, your emotions, and even your decisions. You replay what happened, analyze their behavior, and try to find meaning in actions that may never be fully explained. This constant mental loop keeps you emotionally tied to the situation, even when physically nothing is happening anymore. And the longer your attention stays there, the more power the situation holds over you. Shifting your focus away is not about pretending nothing happened or ignoring your feelings. It is about refusing to let one experience become the center of your entire emotional world. When you redirect your attention, you begin to reclaim control over your energy. Instead of waking up and thinking about what they did, you start thinking about what you want to build. Instead of checking their actions, you start checking your own progress. This shift is where real strength begins to form. You slowly detach from the need to understand every detail of their behavior, because you realize that understanding them is not as important as understanding yourself. You start investing time in things that improve your confidence, your mindset, and your stability. Your attention becomes selective, and you no longer allow it to be consumed by someone who is not contributing to your peace. As your focus moves inward, something powerful happens. The emotional grip of the situation starts to weaken. You are no longer feeding it with constant attention, overthinking, or emotional energy. And when that energy is removed, the intensity of the pain naturally decreases. You begin to see things more clearly without distortion from emotion or attachment. This is also where your identity starts to shift. You stop seeing yourself through the lens of how someone treated you and start seeing yourself through the lens of who you are becoming. Your goals regain importance. Your self-respect strengthens. Your emotional dependence reduces. And without even forcing it, you start becoming someone who is no longer controlled by external actions, but guided by internal direction. Becoming unpredictable in your response is one of the strongest shifts you can make when someone has hurt you, because most people operate on patterns. If you always react with anger, sadness, or long emotional explanations, they begin to expect it. They learn your emotional language. They understand how to push your buttons and how you will likely respond. And once someone can predict your reaction, they also gain a level of control over your emotional space. Breaking that pattern changes everything. When you no longer respond in the same emotional way, you interrupt their expectations. Instead of reacting immediately, you slow down. Instead of sending long emotional messages, you become brief and intentional. Instead of showing visible frustration, you maintain distance and control. This shift doesn't come from pretending. It comes from deciding not to give your emotions away so easily anymore. Unpredictability creates confusion, and confusion forces reflection. When someone cannot read your next move, they start questioning their assumptions. They begin to wonder if you are still affected, if you are detaching, or if you have simply stopped caring. That uncertainty shifts attention back toward you, not because you are trying to manipulate it, but because your behavior no longer fits their expectations. At the same time, this approach protects your emotional energy. You are no longer engaging in reactive patterns that leave you drained afterward. You are choosing responses instead of being pulled into automatic reactions. That small pause between emotion and action becomes your strength. It gives you time to decide whether something deserves your attention or not. Over time, this unpredictability builds emotional authority. You are no longer easy to read, easy to provoke, or easy to control. People begin to understand that they cannot rely on your emotional reactions to guide their behavior anymore. And that alone changes the dynamic completely. Instead of being emotionally accessible at all times, you become selective, measured, and grounded in how you respond to situations that once had full control over your emotions. Leveling up instead of breaking down is the final shift that separates emotional reaction from personal power. When someone hurts you, the natural response for many people is to collapse inward, overthinking, emotional spiraling, loss of focus, and replaying the situation again and again. But that reaction keeps you locked in the same emotional space where the hurt happened. It keeps you connected to the pain instead of moving beyond it. Leveling up means refusing to let the situation define your identity. Instead of asking why it happened over and over, you start asking what you can become because of it. You redirect that emotional weight into discipline, growth, and self-improvement. The same energy that could have been spent on sadness or anger is transformed into progress. You begin to focus on your habits, your mindset, your goals, and your self-respect. This is not about pretending everything is fine. It's about choosing not to stay stuck where the hurt occurred. You allow yourself to feel what you feel, but you don't build your life around that feeling. You use it as a signal, not a destination. And slowly, your attention shifts from what was done to you toward what you are building for yourself. As you grow, something powerful happens internally. Your confidence stops depending on external validation or how someone treated you. It starts coming from your own progress. You notice that you are becoming stronger, more focused, and more emotionally stable. The pain that once felt heavy begins to lose its control over your thoughts because your identity is no longer tied to it. This transformation also changes how others perceive you. When you stop breaking down and start building up, your energy becomes different. You carry yourself with more certainty. You speak with more calm authority. You no longer look like someone waiting for answers. You look like someone creating a new direction. And that shift is what truly changes everything, because growth becomes louder than the hurt that started it.